Anytime in the making of video games, and not just video games, but just any media at all, the development of TV shows, movies, songs, it can happen with any kind of art where the project can just get completely abandoned. Yeah, something like that has really fascinated me, just how that can happen after sometimes years of both physical and creative efforts and work toward making this project come alive. You've heard it before, right? A game that is in the works by a company that you really like, all for it just to be shut down years later. And a lot of the times you get like a vague reason from the company that they use as far as why they had to abandon the project, or even they give a vague explanation of what the project even was. It's overall a very weird situation, and it's even weirder and crazier when you think about it in terms of business. All that time, money, and resources that was spent on this project, well, not only could you have spent it on projects that you actually finished, but now all of that money just completely goes down the drain. It is the way of life. And so this actually brings us to something big that came out today from Square Enix. So they were talking to investors recently, and they had warned of a substantial hit that will likely happen very soon. They are anticipating this hit to be in the form of $140 million. And the reason for this sudden loss in Square Enix's money is due to what they call content abandonment, or in other words, projects that they started and they have since scrapped. $140 million. That is a lot of money. I don't think I need to say that. But let's say they just abandoned, 2 or 3 games. If you do all the math, paying all those workers full time for all the work they did over the years, let's say it's years, I still don't see how that could be $140 million. Which tells me this is more. This is like a ton of different projects. This is a ton of different games, different projects. I mean, maybe even certain hardware they were trying, but they just completely abandoned it. And like I said, usually the explanation we get from companies when they say, hey, we have abandoned a project, usually that explanation is relatively vague. And the same can be said here. Their response to this was just very vague. They didn't really say what these projects were. So naturally, a lot of people have been talking about this and kind of wondering like what these projects were, and more importantly, why the high amount of money, $140 million. Well, to me, I go back to earlier this year, I believe it was late January. I had actually made a video on this at the time. Square Enix had announced at the time that they were reducing their games lineup, and they were working on more of a streamlined sort of quality over quantity approach when it comes to developing their games. So essentially, they wanted to just focus on less games and put more work into those games that they're focusing on. And naturally, obviously, that would mean that, hey, they're going to abandon a bunch of projects. So given this is now about 3 months later, and usually there's quarterly investor calls, to me, I would say that this is very likely a direct result of all of the projects that they decided to abandon about 3 months ago. And this really goes to show, the amount of money that was really invested into these projects that were abandoned. Yeah, ultimately Square Enix took a big hit. Obviously, 140 mil is not something even a company as big as Square Enix is going to take lightly. But I will say this. I like Square Enix. I respect them. Actually, I think they're a very smart company. I think if you look at their history and where they stand today, yeah, sure, they've made mistakes here and there, but overall, I think they think more in terms of, how things will go in the long run. So yes, in the short run, it looks like they did get hit with $140 million worth of losses. And that is terrible, but I'm thinking they are playing the long game. I'm thinking that their quality over quantity approach is definitely the thing that they think is best for their company. And this unfortunately had to result in a bunch of these projects getting abandoned, which did result in a loss of 140 mil. But Square Enix is not stupid. They are smart. They think in the long run. So I think somehow this is going to benefit them in the long run.